Parliament is back in session following the Liberals' throne speech. Now, prior to Parliament being prorogued, there was a committee investigating the We Charity scandal. Will that investigation continue now that MPs are back in Ottawa? To discuss this in more detail is Lethbridge Tory MP Rachael Harder, who joins me now from our nation's capital. Rachael, welcome back to BCN.
Thank you so much, Hal. It's really great to be with you.
Now, will the investigation into the We Charity scandal continue now that MPs are back? What are your thoughts?
Well, Hal, I certainly hope so. You know, Canadians deserve answers. There's some really good questions that are being asked with regards to the We Charity and $912 million that was committed from Trudeau to the charity in order to roll out a youth employment program, or a youth volunteer program, I should say. You know, there's a lot of scandal around that, and Canadians rightly deserve answers to those questions that they have. Now, here's the thing is that Trudeau actually shut down Parliament in August by proroguing it. So it's not a pause button that he hit. It's actually a total cancellation of what was going on prior to that. And so in order for committee to come back and investigate the scandal and the ethics breaches that were undertaken by this prime minister, there has to be a motion passed at committee. And so we'll see. You know, Conservatives are certainly on board. We certainly want to get to the bottom of this. We want answers for Canadians. We'll have to see if the NDP and the Bloc are on board.
How much do you think this has really hurt Trudeau's popularity? Some people refer to him as the Teflon man because nothing really sticks to him. I mean, the Aga Khan, you know, the SNC-Lavalin affair, now We Charity scandal. I mean, he's still quite popular in many parts of Canada. Why do you think that is? Is it the handouts maybe that he's dishing out right now during the pandemic?
Hal, it's a really good question. And, you know, the best I can do is actually turn the question back out there. And that is to say, you know, what is it that this prime minister is doing that, you know, Canadians find so appealing? I'm not entirely sure. You know, I think in the next election, of course, we're going to find out, you know, exactly. Was it the handouts that they're attracted to? Is it his good looks, his great hair, you know, supposedly? But at the end of the day, look, I think there's something that needs to be said here, and that is this country deserves leadership with vision. This country deserves a prime minister who will implement you know, a way to come back from the pandemic and the detriment that it has had on our economy. Canadians deserve to know that they have a solid leader at the helm, and right now I would certainly argue that they don't.
Now, Rachael, with the pandemic still on, are MPs deciding to vote on certain issues via video conferencing or in person, or is it kind of maybe a hybrid model being used right now?
Yeah, exactly. So right now there's a hybrid model being used in Parliament. And so there are some MPs who are able to sit in the House of Commons and some who have to log on virtually. The unfortunate thing about this way of doing things, of course, is those MPs that are in rural areas don't actually have strong enough reception to be able to participate. And so they have to leave their ridings and go into urban centers where they can access, you know, broadband or internet that will help them. In addition to that, though, you know, I think we should look at the fact that other parliaments around the world are able to meet in person and they're able to do so safely. In addition to that, here in Canada, we're sending our kids to school and they're wearing masks and they're sitting in close proximity. And we expect them to be able to go and function and be kept safe. Why can't we, as parliamentarians who have been elected by the Canadian public, do the exact same thing?
Now let's circle back to the spending for just a moment here. Canada's deficit is now approaching $380 billion. Our debt is over $1 trillion. As a country, Rachael, we're going to have to start paying back some of the billions of dollars that the Liberals are doling out. I guess it's safe to say that we're not going to be balancing the books anytime soon?
Yeah, Hal, I think you've hit the nail on the head. You know, Trudeau likes to use this phrase that with COVID, we're able to now build back better, he likes to say. I would have to ask, you know, in what world is it building back better to put tons and tons and tons of debt on the shoulders of our children and our grandchildren? In what world is it building back better to completely ignore the energy sector? In what world is it building back better to ignore the agriculture sector and the fact that they feed not only Canada, but the entire world? You know, that's not a plan to build Canada back better, to ignore those industries. We need a prime minister who has a plan. We need a prime minister who will take leadership. We need a prime minister who will put measurable steps in place in order to bring back Canada.
Now that the NDP has thrown their support behind many of the Liberal spending initiatives, is it safe to say that we may not be seeing an election anytime soon?
Well, you know, I it certainly appears that way, Hal. It would certainly appear that the Liberals have leaned so far to the political left that they have somehow pacified the NDP.
Wow. Newly elected Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole says he wants to keep Canada in the Paris Climate Accord, but still wants to support Alberta's energy sector. How is that possible? How do you harmonize the two?
If we're going to move forward in terms of the strides we want to make with regard to caring for the planet and stewarding our environment, we're going to have to rely largely on innovative practices, which means that we're going to have to get industry involved. This really isn't a solution that's going to be built by government. Yes, government can put vision forward, but ultimately it's going to be the women and men in this country who have incredible intellect and the ability to innovate and come up with new technologies that are going to bring us forward. Ultimately, that's what we're going to be relying on in our plan as Conservatives.
Energy East was taken off the table, getting our oil and gas to Eastern Canada back in 2017. Kenny was talking to Aaron O'Toole about it and so forth. Now, is the Conservative Party of Canada putting any pressure on the Liberals to potentially bring it back? Or maybe a new Energy East? Many Canadians agree that those in the Maritimes should not be buying Saudi Arabian oil, they should be buying Alberta oil.
Yeah, again, really good point, Hal. We certainly have been pushing for a unifying strategy. So one that would bring Eastern and Western Canada together, one that would celebrate our natural resource sector, and in particular, the production of oil and gas, and of course, getting that to market. Part of that is, being able to utilize that resource right here within our own country. Right now, we are, ignoring this industry under Trudeau. And as a result, then the Prime Minister of Canada is currently supporting regimes like Saudi Arabia, which have an atrocious human rights record and don't have policies in place with regards to protecting the environment. Again, I would beg the question, in what world does that make sense? We have an incredible industry right here within our own country. We have the ability to transport product from east to west. We just need to put the infrastructure in place. The only thing that is required is political will. We certainly haven't seen that from Trudeau, but we certainly have that in our leader, Aaron O'Toole.
How should Alberta maybe look at diversifying its economy? We've talked about agriculture in the past, the oil and gas sector. Now, I know Alberta Energy Minister Sonia Savage is talking about delving into more of the minerals, the potash, the uranium, and so forth. What are your thoughts about how can we really diversify?
Sure, I think it's both. I think it's both. We have natural resources at our fingertips, and we certainly need to continue to develop the ones that we already are. As long as there's a market, which there is, we should be looking for creative ways to access that market in order to sell our product, in order to generate revenue. Because we know, Hal, that at the end of the day, that revenue that comes off of oil and gas development is what pays tens of thousands of workers and makes sure that their families are kept care of. In addition to that, we know that it's that revenue that pays for hospitals and schools and roads and bridges and other important infrastructure. So yes, we should be talking about innovation. We should be talking about creativity. We should be talking about moving forward in other sectors and diversifying our economy. Absolutely, all day long. Let's have that conversation. But let's also be realists and understand the fact that there is a need for energy right now, and that need only grows by day.
Calgary Tory MP Michelle Rempel-Garner has an online petition, E2574, I believe it is, against the Liberals' gun ban, saying it does nothing to address gun crime in our country, but instead penalizes lawful gun owners, especially those on farms and acreages. This is the largest online petition in Canadian history with close to 231,000 signatures. But let me ask you something, Rachel. Will it make a difference? Will this influence Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to not confiscate legally owned property?
Well, Hal, certainly a good prime minister would take into account the fact that this petition has been signed by so many Canadians. I mean, after all, Canada is a democracy. I understand that this prime minister would very much like to turn Canada into a socialized nation, or a socialist country, I should say. But the fact of the matter is, we are a parliamentary democracy. And under that system, those Canadians who signed that petition should be taken into account. They should be considered. This prime minister should listen to their voices, should give them weight, and should make changes accordingly.
Now let's discuss the drug crisis going on in our city here in Lethbridge. And now there's a new group calling itself the Lethbridge Overdose Prevention Society, or LOPS, opening up an unsanctioned tent injection site. Now the province says it's illegal. Mayor Spearman says he's willing to work with the province to help find a solution. But you, being an MP, How about in Ottawa? What can Ottawa do to really help with our solution on our drug crisis here?
Well, again, Hal, you're asking a question that overlaps between municipal, provincial, and federal politics. Certainly as member of parliament for Lethbridge, it is my local community, and I am very interested in the issues that impact those who call it home. I've heard concern after concern after concern from residents within Lethbridge who very much want their community restored to a place that is safe, that is secure. They want to be able to go out with their children and invite the parks and the recreational spaces that our city has, which we have so many, and that's amazing. But in order to make that happen, we have to have a community effort that works toward a solution. And I would say the provincial government right now, yes, they shut down Arches, and we know that they did that because there was criminal activity taking place within the organization. So yes, the organization was held to account, as they should be. What the provincial government did, though, in order to actually assist our community, is they set up a mobilized injection site. And so there is still an opportunity for people to access a safe space where they can consume the drug of their choice and where they will be protected from overdose. That's in place. And unfortunately, that has largely been ignored as a positive step within our community. And so, as you can tell, help, there's really no need for this unsanctioned tent. Those individuals who want to be cared for, who want to access medical attention, which is not offered at the tent, but is offered at the mobilized site, they can do so. Again, how ultimately the goal should be a common one here, and that is the safety and the security, the well-being of the citizens who call Lethbridge home.
We've received word that many Alberta farmers have received record crops this year, and livestock markets are set to reach record highs of $7 billion. What can Ottawa do to help support our farmers here in southwestern Alberta and around the country? As you know, agriculture is big business, which will help our economy to recover from the pandemic.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you asked the question because this is a big area of passion for me. Agriculture is our superpower. As a country, it is our superpower, and certainly in southern Alberta, it is our superpower. We have access to irrigation. We are able to produce such a variety of crops, and then, of course, animals as well. And so, out of that, we are contributing in amazing ways to our economy, but also we are feeding our country. And hell, it would be worth also noting that there are only 5 countries around the world that produce more food than they consume. And Canada is one of those 5. If that's not worth celebrating, I don't know what is. I mean, that's just amazing. Those men and women who farm day in and day out, they work incredibly hard to look after our country. That's a sector that deserves to be celebrated and further developed. And again, I was really disappointed in the speech from the throne. The Prime Minister gave, hardly an honorable mention to the industry. Why do we not have an economic plan in place that includes those women and men, in a way that is tangible and by which we can overcome the economic instability that we currently face?
Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro has said that he will not make the COVID-19 vaccine mandatory in our province. Now, has there been any talk in Ottawa from the federal government looking at bringing forth potential legislation making it mandatory, or is it more of a provincial jurisdiction?
Ultimately, at the end of the day, the provinces are going to have to make decisions on this. Currently, I'm not sure exactly where the current government at a federal level sits on this. My personal position, however, and certainly the position of my party, is that a vaccine should not be made mandatory, that the freedom of Canadians should be protected, that individuals should be given the opportunity to choose whether or not they will, in fact, take a vaccination, should it be offered to them.
Now, Rachel, the COVID-19 pandemic, as we know, has hurt many business owners across the country, including here in our beautiful province of Alberta. A recent survey says 60% of restaurant owners will close their eateries for good if there's another lockdown with a second wave of the virus. How can we better support those business owners?
Again, Hal, an excellent question. I wish you had been in the room with the Prime Minister when he was drafting the throne speech. These are the questions that we would have expected to be answered there. We would have expected that the Prime Minister, after proroguing Parliament and having weeks upon weeks to plan his throne speech, the bare minimum we would expect from him is that he would have a plan for economic recovery. Unfortunately, the only thing that was within that throne speech was one recycled failed promise after another. You know, it was tragedy. It was an absolute tragedy. You know, you would expect the prime minister to be able to serve the well-being of Canadians, to be able to put forward a captivating vision, to be able to put measurable steps in front of them, a plan to move forward. Unfortunately, it's Canadians like the ones you've mentioned who have local small businesses such as restaurants, etc., who are going to be hurt by this prime minister's failed policy. At the end of the day, it's really sad. It's really unfortunate because it's those individuals who help keep our local communities vibrant, who provide jobs to other individuals who can support their families then. And and unfortunately, they are going to have to close their doors. They are suffering under this prime minister's leadership. Very sad.
Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachael Harder, thanks for joining me today from Ottawa.
Thanks, Hal.